If you've clicked on this video, there's a high chance that you consume way too much social media. And so I've made this video to educate people on, I think, a few of the main problems with social media, why it's so bad, what are the problems it, causes. And I think there's a lot of things in here that people don't really talk about that much. Sorry if it's a little bit echoey at the moment. I'm recording in a different place to usual, which is why I don't have the face cam on. But this is basically what we're going to talk about, guys. The 4 big issues I'm going to go through are addiction. So like palatable content consumption. By palatable, I mean, content that's very easy to consume. Palatable generally means like delicious, but you know what I mean. Reduced attention span, worse mental health, and lifestyle effects. So hit the subscribe button and let's go through this. And there's going to be actionable steps at the end for improving your ability to handle social media. So the first thing we're going to talk about is addiction. Social media content, I think, I'm going to move somewhere else because I'm afraid I'm going to record this whole video and it's going to be so incredibly echoey that no one wants to listen to it. So bear with me, I'm moving somewhere else. All right. Social media content is extremely palatable. So when we think palatable, we think like junk food, that kind of stuff, things that are really easy to eat a lot of because they're delicious. As far as content goes, social media is like the junk food of content. So you've got reading, which is like the healthy food. Then you've got movies, TV, and that kind of thing. And then now we're at a stage where we have short form content and other content on social media that's extremely palatable. You have creators that you like to watch. And what this actually does is it spikes your dopamine in the same way that addictions spike your dopamine. So if you don't know what dopamine is, it's basically a hormone in your body and it's kind of like the pleasure hormone. So when you eat junk food, when you watch short form content like on social media, Instagram Reels, anything like that, trying to think of, there's obviously extreme examples, like if you're doing heroin, that's going to spike your dopamine a lot. But even things that we think like aren't that bad, like, most people drink, everyone kind of eats a bit of junk food, that kind of thing. All of these things give you dopamine spikes and they're not healthy for you, which means the more you indulge in that thing, your body gets used to that dopamine spike from that thing. It associates that thing with pleasure, and that's how addiction forms. Another word I'm going to introduce you to if you haven't heard before is instant gratification. So instant gratification is basically things that aren't particularly good for you, but they give you a dopamine spike right now. So I just mentioned a few, junk food, short form content, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of them. I think I mentioned alcohol as well. That would be another example of instant gratification. And doing these things, of which social media is one, is always going to be bad for you. It's wasting time when you could be working on your purpose. It's making your brain work worse. It's reducing your health, all kinds of stuff like that. So that is the main bad thing about social media, is that you can consume a lot of it and it's not good for you at all. So the next thing I'm going to mention is it creates a parasocial relationship. A parasocial relationship is like a social relationship, but it's got the word para, meaning it's not like a full social relationship. So if you think about you talking to a friend, that hopefully, it could be a bad relationship, but hopefully that's a healthy social relationship where you're talking to each other in real life and you do stuff together. A parasocial relationship, like the kind I'm talking about on social media, is where you consume content from someone, and what actually happens over time, because you're constantly seeing that person, listening to them talk to you like they're talking to you, even though they're only talking to a camera, and constantly learning about that person's life. Like if you think about the creators you watch, you know so much about them. They make you laugh every single day, maybe watch more than an hour of them every single day. What that's actually doing in your caveman brain is actually, it's making you think you're building a relationship with this person, even though they don't have no idea who you are and you've never actually spoken to them in real life. Simply because you're constantly exposing yourself to them, they're triggering a whole heap of emotions in you. And if you're watching them a lot, you obviously respect them and like them enough. Probably more than a lot of the people you know in real life. If you think about a lot of the people you know in real life, just because of circumstance. They live near you, they went to your school, they work with you. Maybe they're your family and you don't like them that much. Hopefully you like all the people in your family, but I know that's a little bit idealistic. Whereas the people you watch online, you have complete freedom to choose absolutely anyone you watch online. And what happens is the algorithm on social media is just going to echo chamber things that thinks you like to you. That's why whenever, a teenage boy or whatever downloads Instagram, it's got Andrew Tate reels and, pictures of girls that it recommends to you in your feed, because that's what it thinks you want to see. And I've seen on like a girl's phone when they download Instagram for the first time, it's completely different, simply because when you put in your age and gender, even before you've actually looked at anything, it starts recommending you content that it thinks you want to see, because these apps are designed to keep you on there. They're designed to encourage parasocial relationships, and they're designed to encourage addiction. So that's a little bit about addiction. A few more things I will say before we move on, but this is a really important one, is posting attention-seeking content becomes addictive as well. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, I don't even think I need to go on with that. There's also FOMO, which is fear of missing out. So not just the fear of like, not like missing out on going to like a party or something. I guess that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm more talking about people have like a subconscious fear of not knowing what's going on, like not knowing the current trends, the things people are doing, simply because if it's something that they need to be included in, then they want to feel included. It's kind of like a tribal thing. And as soon as people are doing something that you're not doing, it kind of causes a bit of anxiety, simply because if you think about, you know, our hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, if you weren't included in something, it was basically a death sentence, because you couldn't provide for yourself on your own, no matter how strong you were, and you would probably die. So that's why it causes anxiety. I did already mention echo chambers. Echo chambers are basically like, if you know how like the algorithm recommends you things you like, so if you watch one gym video, suddenly your entire home screen is gym videos, and that kind of thing. It also like reinforces bias. If you consume content from, you know, one opinion or perspective, it's going to keep recommending stuff like that. Just understand that the algorithm is designed to keep you on there as long as possible. It's designed to show you things. It looks at what you've watched and what you've liked, and especially what you spend the most time on. So maybe you click on videos, but you don't really watch the whole thing. But some videos, you watch the entire thing and you rewatch it. It knows all these things, and it shows you the things that it thinks you want to see. And it also, you know, who knows what permissions you've let this thing have. Maybe it can go into other apps on your phone. It can go through, you know, your data and figure out exactly. It can know you better than you know yourself, and that's why it's able to show you videos that have just come out a few minutes ago on, you know, YouTube or whatever, and it knows already that you want to watch it, and it could, you know, it could probably guess and make money on how long you watch these videos for, simply because it knows your entire record. It knows what you've been watching. So just be aware of that, and also be aware everyone has a soft addiction. Even I have a soft addiction to social media, even though I don't really like using it that much. I was always the person. I remember I didn't have Snapchat until grade 10. I don't think I had Instagram until grade 12. At school, when everyone else was using it in like 7th grade, you'd be like 12 turning 13, and then 10th grade I would have been turning 16 that year, and I didn't have Snapchat until then. So I've always been the person who doesn't really like using it, and even I have an addiction, you know, where sometimes I catch myself watching short form content. It makes me feel bad, but I never, you know, I've never been as bad as other people, so I can only imagine what some people do, where they're on Instagram for literally like 4 or 5 hours a day looking at absolute nonsense. But that's a little bit about addiction, and I think I already said this at the start, guys, but there will be actionable steps at the end for improving how you consume social media and using it for good reasons only, and also limiting the amount you use it. So the second thing we're going to talk about now is attention span, and this is seriously underrated, because a lot of people wonder why, you know, why do so many people have like ADHD why are so many people diagnosed with ADHD and, you know, behavioral disorders, and why are more kids rowdy and, you know, on medication and that kind of thing? My mum's a kindergarten teacher, so I hear about all this stuff firsthand, but I think one of the big reasons, it might not be the only reason, but one of the big reasons that for all this stuff and why people have such short attention spans is because of social media. So if you think about 100 years ago, if people wanted entertainment, what was 100 years ago? It was 1925. If people wanted entertainment, they would read books, they would, you know, maybe listen to a music vinyl. I don't even know if, like a music gramophone. I don't even know what musical thing existed, but like they could obviously still listen to music. They might just have to go play it themselves or go to a live performance. They might have had some very poor quality movies in 1925. That was like, movies, if they existed in 1925, if not a little bit later, that was like the peak of dopamine. That was the most dopamine you could possibly get. And as time has gone on, we've created more and more high dopamine things. We've got, you know, we went from black and white movies with no sound all the way to colored movies eventually. Now you can watch movies on Netflix for basically no money. It costs like a little bit each month. Now we have TV shows, and then now we have social media, of course, which is even more palatable than TV shows. And then what's even more palatable than just normal social media is short form content, which is the most palatable thing I think that currently exists. There might be some, VR technology that overtakes it in the future, but I would say short form content is the most palatable, high dopamine thing that currently exists. And what's happened to us as a society as we've constantly upgraded how much dopamine we can get from things, because that's what we look for. People are always going to buy things that make them feel good, and this kind of fuels innovation for higher and higher dopamine things. What has actually happened because of that is that people have a way shorter and worse attention span, tons of ADHD-like symptoms. I'm not, an expert on ADHD by any stretch, so when I say that, I'm not, I'm not saying anyone actually has ADHD. I just mean symptoms like, that came out wrong. Obviously there are people with ADHD. I didn't mean to say it like nobody has it, but I'm just saying people who have ADHD-like symptoms, because they've been only consuming short-form content. I mean, they have to put a book down after like reading one line. They might read a page of a book and they've completely zoned out and they don't remember any of it, so they have to reread it. Just things like that, having to get up and move around when you're in the middle of a task you've set yourself, not being able to concentrate on anything and feeling a constant craving to consume social media, which would link back to the addiction thing we just talked about. All of these things, I think, in so many people, it's not some like genetic ADHD disorder, it's environmental, because they've just consumed so much short form content that's actually stopped their brain from being able to look at longer things. Because when you receive dopamine from something, your brain associates the pleasure of that dopamine with that thing, and it starts to form an addiction, as we just talked about before. And we also talked about how it lowers your baseline dopamine whenever you spike it. So think about it. You're constantly spiking your dopamine from this one thing. It's lowering your baseline dopamine, which is going to make you feel less happy overall. And so your brain now has lower dopamine, and it associates this thing with making you happy. That forms an addiction. You're constantly looking at that. It's making the whole problem worse, and your attention span is getting worse and worse. So I want to give you this analogy, and I call it the focus pill. I can't remember who originally said it, but I think I've changed it a little bit, so I'm going to say that it's mine, even though it's not 100% originally mine. Ship of Theseus, I don't care. So I want you to imagine there's a pill, right? It's not a fake pill, it's not a hoax, it's not a scam, it's not a drug that's going to make you feel bad. It's literally a pill that's commonly accepted, and it can 10x. We'll say it can 3x your focus. So if you take this pill for the rest of your life, it's tripled your focus. And imagine you knew for a fact that it was right. Like, people had taken it, it was like the new miracle thing. And it just gave you, it was like gold, and it just gave you triple focus for the rest of your life. How much do you think people would pay for that? How much money would a pill that improves your focus that much be worth? If you think about it, your focus is better. You're going to be able to read 3 times faster. You can learn faster. You can concentrate on difficult things faster. You're going to make more money. You're going to feel better. You're going to be able to help people more. All these benefits you're going to get from it. How much do you reckon people would pay for that for a life investment? Like $100, $500, $1,000, $10,000? How much do you think people would pay to triple their focus for the rest of their life? The good news about this, and you might be wondering where I'm going with this analogy, here's where I'm going. The good news is that pill already exists, and it's completely free, and it's guaranteed to work with no side effects. All you have to do is stop consuming the amount of social media content you're consuming. So you might have just agreed with me when I said you might pay $1,000 for that tripling your focus pill. Because of the benefits it gives you, you can actually already get that pill for free. All you have to do is just not consume the amount of social media content you are, particularly short form content. I've already made a video on dopamine detoxes, and I'll have it pop up on the screen right now. If you want to check it out after this video, it'll be linked in the description. But if you can do the dopamine detox and you can cut back on social media content, you will actually have this pill that you just agreed with me that people might pay $1,000 for that. And you can have that for free. All you have to do is do something that's going to improve your life anyway. So I think anyone who doesn't do that is crazy. But the third reason that social media is as big of a problem as it is, and I think this is a really big unspoken reason, mental health is the reason I'm talking about. But the biggest part of mental health, because people usually go straight to cyberbullying, obviously that is a problem, but I think the biggest problem as far as mental health is concerned is it just tanks your dopamine. We've already talked about this, so I'm not going to go into it, but it just literally tanks your dopamine. When you're constantly lowering your baseline dopamine, you're just constantly in a bad mood. If anyone's ever been in like a rut, you would have been in a rut before. A rut is basically like a period of low productivity where you're feeling really bad, so you do a bunch of bad habits like eating junk food to try and make yourself feel better. You know for a fact when you're in a rut and you try and, eat junk food or whatever to make yourself feel better, yeah, it kind of makes you feel better, but then you feel even worse after that, and eventually you kind of have to pick yourself up and get out of it after a good night's sleep, and then you're back in business effectively. But what social media does is it tanks your dopamine constantly. It's spiking your dopamine and then lowering it below your baseline. So I think a lot of people in this generation just have way lower baseline dopamine. I think that is one of the biggest reasons behind people constantly wonder, oh, why is Gen Z so depressed? Why are generations getting more and more depressed? I think it's because with each generation, we're inventing more and more pleasurable things that are spiking people's dopamine, and they're actually, generation by generation, human beings have had their dopamine tanked to the point where now people just have such a low baseline dopamine that it's just difficult to do anything. That's why if you've ever been in a, obviously everyone here has been in a bad mood. I shouldn't have said if you've ever been in a bad mood. But for a fact when you're in a bad mood, it's so much more difficult to do things. You don't want to mow the lawn when you're feeling bad. You want to lie down and eat junk food because you're seeking dopamine. And I think the reason you wouldn't want to mow the lawn or do any kind of difficult thing when you're in a bad mood is because when your dopamine is so low, you crave dopamine and you only want to do things that give you dopamine. You physically can't discipline yourself. Well, you can discipline yourself, but it takes a lot of discipline to make yourself do things that aren't pleasurable when you have very low dopamine. And so I think because our generation has such a tanked dopamine level compared to previous generations, that's why people burn out so quickly. I think Gen Z said they were burning out after I can't remember the exact statistic, but it was Gen Z said that after 25 hours of work a week, they were burning out. When, I don't know about your country, but in Australia, I'm pretty sure full-time work is 38 or 38 and a half hours. It's around 40, maybe just a little bit under. That's what a full-time working week is, and Gen Z was burning out after 25. And people are like, oh my God, they're such pussies, that kind of thing. It's never as simple as that. I think the actual reason behind it is because they've absolutely tanked their dopamine and they're purposeless, but that's a separate thing. So that's a very important thing to understand. Comparison as well is, I think, an important thing on social media, and a lot of people go straight to teenage girls are upset because they see people, other women that body shame them, or they body shame themselves because they see unrealistic expectations. I guess that's one example, but I think the biggest thing with comparison is that you're just constantly, when you're there consuming, doing absolutely nothing, you're seeing people living their best lives, even if they're not. Some of them are, but even if they're not, living their best lives, uploading the best possible everything. And what that actually does is, now that you have a low dopamine level, you're now seeing people who appear to have better lives than you would. And that juxtaposition is so great that I think it causes even more mental health problems. It's just not good. Listen, it is absolutely good to have positive role models, and if you're going to the gym, you will never hear me say, for someone who's trying to go to the gym, oh, you're not allowed to watch any gym videos ever because you'll start body shaming yourself. That's such a silly thing to say. Obviously, it is good to surround yourself with positive role models. I'm just saying a lot of the content people consume, although the people they're consuming might have traits they want, maybe they have a lot of money, maybe they're in fantastic shape, maybe they live an exciting life, even if they have traits that you want, they might not actually be good role models, and consuming their content might not actually be helping you get to that level that you want. Because if someone has a trait that you want, you should be working together. You shouldn't be, vicariously living through them. If you want to get fit, for example, you shouldn't just be consuming content of someone who's in fantastic shape, who maybe posts reels of them exercising, because that isn't particularly helpful in actually, showing you the exercises and helping you get to that level yourself. You're just kind of watching them do it, which doesn't make you feel good. So golden rule, if you're consuming social media, which I'll talk about in the actionable steps more, make sure it is useful for you and it's actually helping you reach the goals you want to achieve, and you're not vicariously living through other people, watching them have the things you want and feeling some kind of weaker version of fulfillment through that, because ultimately that's not good for you. Anxiety from social judgment as well. I guess, there's always the possibility. I think this has happened to me once. I accidentally put something on my story that was a picture of the wall, and even it was just a blurry picture of the wall that I accidentally put on my Snapchat story once. And that is literally one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me on social media, because I've always thought, what if I accidentally took a photo when I was getting shamed? You know what I mean? That's just terrifying, that I could have accidentally put a photo on my story that dozens of people have seen before I even realized it was out. What if I took a photo from my photos of me, with my family or something, and I just don't want that to be on social media. You know what I mean? So I think there's that constant underlying anxiety that you're going to post something on social media on accident, or you're going to post something that's going to be not liked, or people are going to cyberbully you or talk about you, anything like that. I think the social judgment side, and we already talked about how, this kind of anxiety stems from, our caveman mentality from thousands of years of evolution, where we feel anxious whenever people, socially ostracize us, because it was basically a death sentence thousands of years ago. Whereas nowadays, it's not a death sentence at all. It doesn't really matter if people socially ostracize you. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to kill you, basically. But because it's on such a dramatically magnified scale, because on social media, it's thousands of people, it's kind of multiplying your anxiety, even though there really is no active threat. You're not going to get torn apart by a lion. And so that is the anxiety component of it. I'm not really going to go into cyberbullying because I think that's pretty straightforward and it gets talked about a lot, but I guess that's another part of the mental health thing. And then feelings of social isolation, I guess if you're seeing people having fun and you're not, that's kind of like, it can make you feel like you're excluded, which kind of links back to the anxiety and depression thing again, from social ostracization or being left out of the tribe. And then finally, brain rot content for mental health. I think this one gets talked about, but not really linked to mental health. I think when you're constantly consuming just crap like, edits of people with, shitty TikTok music, I don't know, it just makes me feel terrible watching it. And I think for a lot of people, it's just not good. I'm not really going to go into it because I didn't think brain rot content through when I put it there, but I guess you'd probably agree with me that it's just bad for you and you shouldn't watch it. So the fourth and final thing we're going to talk about before we move on to actionable steps, and I end this video because I have a really sore throat and I'm definitely not tired and need to piss really badly, but lifestyle effects of social media. So social media impacts your sleep. That's the first thing. Excuse me. You're constantly going to be thinking about stuff, and the blue light from your device is keeping you awake when you're checking it late at night. Constant notification distraction impacts productivity. Guys, I've seen people, I've done it myself, but I've also seen people literally have their phone going off next to them while they're trying to work, and it's so distracting. I think it was King's College in London and a few other colleges in London did studies that found smoking marijuana was actually less harmful to your productivity than having your phone going off next to you. So whenever you've got your phone next to you beeping notifications, just imagine you literally had a joint in your hand, because that is actually worse than that for your focus for whatever task you're working on. So that's how bad having your phone going off is for your productivity. Spread of misinformation as well. Don't really need to go into that, but that's another example. And then finally, echo chambers. Like, by echo chambers, we already talked about that. Cool, don't need to go on. So now that we've gone through the 4 parts of this, what are the actual actionable steps you can do to improve how you use social media and to become a better person? So the first thing I'm going to say is understand social media feels good, but is actually making your life worse. If you can't come to terms with this, I don't think there's much point going on, and you should probably just click off the video. Because if you think social media consumption largely is good for you, you're not going to start to avoid it simply because you don't recognize it as the threat it is. Just like the person who thinks, eating junk food isn't bad for them, they're never going to actually stop doing it because they just have no reason to stop doing it because it feels good. So I think I've given you pretty compelling reasons. If you want one final reason why social media feels good but is making your life worse, it's just wasting time when you could be working on other stuff. Like, everyone should be working on their purpose and trying to become the best person possible and improving people's lives around them. But instead, you're watching absolute brain rot crap and other people work on their purpose on social media instead of actually doing it yourself. So that is the first thing I need you to understand. Once you understand that, we can go on. The second thing I'd recommend you do is no social media before X time. So the more time you can spend off social media, like fasted from it, the better. So what I'd recommend is, if you're checking notifications, set a specific time of the day where you're allowed to check your phone afterwards, preferably later in the day. I don't recommend checking your phone in the morning, and you'll find this definitely improves your relationship with social media. Obviously, if you need to check Messenger or, your Facebook group chat for work, don't ban yourself from doing it like 6 out of 7 days a week, because that's just silly. Like, you need to be able to stay up to date with stuff. But obviously things like Instagram, Snapchat, you can probably just delete them if you want. or set yourself times when you're actually allowed to check them. And ideally, you don't even consume content, you just check messages on them. But yeah, set yourself clear rules that you can follow. The third thing I'm going to say is turn off all notifications. So again, you can make an exception for whatever platform, you know, your work group chat is. But what you can do is you can silence your phone, and then you can go into apps, click on each social media app, and then turn off the notifications for all of them so that your phone isn't constantly beeping. Guarantee you that you're not going to miss anything particularly important. Just get rid of it. Yep. And the fourth thing I'd recommend you do is you set yourself goals to work on. So when you don't have clear goals to work on, it's very easy to just indulge in instant gratification and not actually do anything productive simply because you have nothing to actually delay gratification for. So what I'd recommend you do is set yourself clear goals. It could be, you know, to get healthier, to get in better shape, etc., where you're going to designate time to work on them. And what this will do is it'll actually give you something in the future to work towards rather than just mindlessly consume and, you know, indulge in instant gratification and make your own life worse. So a bonus tip, guys, is to make your phone black and white. You can do this. Just Google how to do it. I can't bother explaining it. And also deleting all social media can be good as well, but that's a little bit extreme. Guys, that is a video. If you want to watch my video on dopamine detoxes, I'll have it linked in the description. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button and have a good one.